Mara stood behind the thin curtain at the small-town community hall, trying to calm her shaking hands. She had never imagined she would end up at a public event like this, where strangers would decide whether they wanted to give her a place to stay and a little work to do. It was a charity program the local town held every year, meant to help people who were struggling. Most of the time, workers, farmers, shop owners, or ranch families would offer simple jobs in exchange for meals, shelter, and a chance for someone to restart their life. To the audience, it was just a helpful tradition. But to Mara, it felt like a last chance. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Her whole journey to this town felt like a blur. Cold bus stops, long roads, and days where she didn't speak to anyone. She had left her old life behind with only a small bag and a heart full of fear. But she also carried a tiny hope, something she hadn't felt in months. Someone had told her about this town, saying the people here were kind. She didn't know if she truly believed that, but she had no other place to go. A volunteer peeked behind the curtain and gave her a soft smile. "You're up next," the woman said kindly. Mara nodded. Though inside, she felt her legs weaken. She tried to straighten her faded jacket. It was a little too large for her, but it was the only clothing she felt comfortable in. Her shoes were old, her hair pulled back in a simple way. She knew she didn't look strong. She knew she looked tired. She had seen her own reflection, and sometimes wondered if there was anything left in her that looked hopeful at all. But she told herself she had to try. She stepped out from behind the curtain and walked slowly toward the small platform where the host stood with a microphone. The hall wasn't big, but it was full. People filled the rows of folding chairs, farmers with their dusty boots, women from the local shops, elders who came every year just to show support. Conversation quieted when she walked onto the stage. She could feel every eye on her, and she lowered her gaze to the wooden floor. The host, a cheerful man with a friendly face, introduced her gently. "This is Mara," he said to the crowd. "She's looking for a place to stay and some simple work to help her get back on her feet. She's ready to learn and eager to start fresh." Mara felt her heart thump loudly in her chest. She kept her hands clasped together, trying to hide the trembling. She wanted to look confident, but she knew she didn't. She felt small under the bright lights of the hall. The host paused, waiting for someone to speak up. "Who'd like to make an offer?" he asked with a hopeful smile. Silence, the kind of silence that stretches on far too long. Mara tried not to lift her head, but she could sense the hesitation in the room. People whispered quietly among themselves. A few kind faces looked sympathetic, but others looked unsure. Mara understood why. She didn't look like someone who could do heavy work. She didn't look strong enough for farm tasks or physical labor. She looked thin, fragile even. Someone still recovering from something she never talked about. A woman in the front row leaned toward her husband and whispered, "She looks too tired. I don't think she could help around the shop." Her voice wasn't cruel, just doubtful. A man in dusty boots scratched his beard and shook his head softly. "I need someone who can lift equipment. She doesn't look ready for that." Every comment, even the gentle ones, felt like a small weight pressing down on Mara's chest. She tried not to take it personally, but it was difficult. She had been rejected before by places, by people, by circumstances she couldn't control. She told herself this was different, that these were good people trying to make the right choice. Still, the sting was there. The host tried again, keeping his voice friendly and warm. "Anyone? Even simple work-light chores, companionship for older folks, help with basic tasks?" Mara is willing to try anything. More silence. Some people shifted in their seats. Others looked away to avoid meeting her eyes. It wasn't that they didn't care. They just didn't know how to help someone who looked as unsure as she did. Mara finally lifted her gaze a little, just enough to see the room. She didn't see judgment, only hesitation. But even that was painful. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell them she would try her hardest, that she didn't want charity, only a chance. But the words stuck somewhere deep inside her, trapped by months of fear and exhaustion. A man in the back cleared his throat, stood up halfway, then sat back down. A woman beside him whispered, Maybe next year. Someone else murmured. Poor thing. Each second felt longer than the last. Mara's eyes lowered again. She thought about leaving. About quietly stepping off the platform and walking out the door. She imagined herself back on the road, carrying her small bag. Unsure of where to go, the idea scared her, but the humiliation of standing here with no one willing to speak up felt even heavier. The host's voice softened, almost apologetic now. Just one offer would help, he said gently. Anyone at all? Nothing. The hall was filled with people. But in that moment, Mara felt completely alone. The lights above her felt too bright, the air too warm, her heartbeat too loud. She wished she could disappear. Wished she could turn invisible so no one had to see her standing there, like someone unwanted. She took a small step back, ready to leave the stage and accept that this, too, was another door closing. Then, right when she thought the moment was over, a voice rose from the back. A deep, calm voice that didn't sound unsure at all. I'll take her. The room shifted. People turned. The host looked up with surprise and relief, but Mara didn't look yet. She stood still, as if the voice wasn't real. The voice spoke again, clearer this time. I'll take her home. Slowly, she lifted her head. Near the back of the hall stood a tall man with a worn hat in his hand, his posture straight and steady. His clothes were simple jeans, a faded shirt, boots covered in dust. A cowboy. Someone who looked like he worked with the land. Someone quiet and confident in a gentle way. He didn't smile widely, but there was a calmness in his eyes that reached all the way to the stage. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at her. Mara felt her breath catch, not out of fear, but out of pure surprise. Of all the people in the room, he was the last person she thought might step forward. She didn't know him, had never seen him before, yet something about his voice, the steadiness of it, made her heart slow down for the first time that day. The crowd whispered again, but this time for a different reason. This man wasn't known for participating in events like this. He usually kept to himself, working on his ranch far from town. People respected him, but they also understood he wasn't the type to volunteer for much. But today, he had spoken. And he had spoken for her. The host smiled, surprised but grateful. Thank you, Caleb, he said. Caleb. So that was his name. Mara stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to react. She wasn't used to someone stepping forward for her, especially not in front of a whole room. But the kindness in his eyes told her that he wasn't doing it for show. He wasn't doing it because he felt sorry for her. He was doing it because he genuinely wanted to help. For the first time that day, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, relief. And just a little hope. Caleb didn't usually come to town events. He preferred the quiet of his ranch, the sound of horses moving in the pasture, and the wide open sky that didn't ask him to talk much. But that day, he had stopped by the community hall because he needed a few supplies from town and thought he would sit inside for a few minutes to rest his feet. He didn't expect to stay. He didn't expect anything unusual to happen. He certainly didn't expect to see a young woman standing alone on the stage, looking as if the whole world had pressed her down. From the moment Mara walked into the light, Caleb noticed the way she held her hands. They trembled slightly. Not because she was weak, but because she was trying so hard to stay calm. He noticed her eyes too tired, uncertain, but not empty. Something inside her was still trying to fight for a better chance. Caleb watched the room more than he watched her. He saw how people hesitated. Not out of unkindness, but out of confusion. They didn't know what kind of help she needed, and they weren't sure they could give it. Caleb didn't blame them, but he felt something tighten inside his chest as he watched her slowly start to shrink back from the attention, ready to walk off the stage. He remembered a similar feeling from years ago, long days when he had felt alone after losing people dear to him. Days when silence was heavier than any physical work. He had gotten through it only because someone, once upon a time, had given him a place to rest without asking questions. He never forgot that. When Mara lowered her head and the host made one last plea for someone to step forward. Caleb knew she wouldn't get another chance like this. He also knew something else: if she walked out of that hall, she might not come back to try again. Some people were strong, but their hope was fragile. And hope needed just one small hand to hold on to. Before he even fully thought it through, he heard his own voice rising in the quiet hall. "I'll take her." It felt natural, simple, as if the decision had already been waiting at the edge of his mind. People turned toward him. Some raised their eyebrows. A few whispered softly. But no one judged him. They just looked surprised, because Caleb never stepped forward like this. He preferred to stay behind the scenes, do his work quietly, and return home. Caleb walked toward the front slowly, not wanting to rush or startle Mara. When he reached the stage, he tipped his hat politely and met her eyes. Up close, he could see how worn out she looked. But he could also see something steady in her gaze, as if she was trying not to fall apart. "It's all right," he said in a calm voice meant only for her. "If you need a place to stay, you can come with me." Mara swallowed, her voice small when she finally spoke. "Are you sure?" Caleb nodded once. "Yes, ma'am. I've got space. And plenty of work that doesn't need heavy lifting." She looked uncertain still, as if she couldn't trust her own luck. People had promised her things before, and then changed their minds. But Caleb's eyes held no pressure. No rush. No hint of anything unkind. Just quiet certainty. The host thanked him warmly. Papers were signed quickly, and a few women from the audience packed Mara a small lunch bag for the road. The kindness touched her, but she was still overwhelmed. She followed Caleb outside, feeling the cool air on her face like a small relief after the warm, crowded hall. Caleb opened the passenger door of his old truck. It wasn't shiny or modern, but it was clean and well cared for. Mara hesitated before stepping in. She wasn't afraid of him, something about him felt safe, but she was scared of the unknown, scared of starting again. Still, she reminded herself she had come this far. She had to trust someone eventually. Caleb climbed into the driver's side and started the engine. The truck rumbled in a familiar way, like a loyal old friend. Mara sat with her hands folded in her lap, unsure what to say. Caleb didn't speak right away either. He wasn't the kind of man who filled silence just to fill it. He waited until they had driven a few minutes out of town, past the grocery store, past the small diner, and onto the quiet road that led to the outskirts. "You don't need to worry about anything," he said gently, keeping his eyes on the road. "You can rest as long as you need. I don't expect more than you can give." Mara looked out the window, watching the land stretch wider with each passing minute. She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to people saying things without expecting something in return. "Thank you," she finally whispered. Caleb gave a small nod. "You're welcome." The road became smoother as they moved away from town and toward the open fields. Horses grazed in the distance, their shapes calm against the golden light of late afternoon. Fences lined the land in long, straight stretches, showing that someone took care of this place with steady hands. Mara noticed the peacefulness immediately. After days of noise, fear, and travel, this quiet countryside felt unreal. The sky looked wider than any she had seen in a long time. Caleb glanced toward her briefly. "Out here, things move slow," he said. "You'll get used to it." She nodded softly, though she wasn't sure if she would fit into this world. She had lived through too much change already, and even the calmness felt like something she had to relearn. As they drove, a small question formed in her mind. She held it for a moment before gathering the courage to ask. "Why? Why did you choose me?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He took a breath, thinking. He wasn't a man who spoke without reason. "You reminded me of someone I knew once," he said simply. "Someone who needed a place to rest. Someone who just needed people to give her time." He paused, then added, "Everyone deserves that." Mara turned her eyes back to the window, not to hide tears, but to take in the gentle view outside. She wasn't sure exactly who he meant, but his words warmed something inside her. The drive continued quietly. The sky slowly shifted colors, turning warm shades of orange and pink. The land opened even more, showing hills and wide fields. Finally, After nearly half an hour, Caleb turned onto a long gravel driveway. Ahead of them stood a ranch house, steady, simple, warm-looking, with smoke rising from the chimney. A barn rested a little distance away, and horses grazed near the fence. The whole place looked peaceful, like a home that didn't rush anyone. Mara felt her chest tighten with a feeling she didn't recognize at first. Only after a few quiet seconds did she realize what it was. It was relief. Caleb parked the truck and stepped out. He didn't hurry her. He carried her small bag in one hand and gestured gently toward the porch. "This is home," he said. "You can take your time getting settled. No pressure." Mara stepped out of the truck slowly, feeling the gravel under her shoes, the cool air on her skin, and the strange but comforting quietness all around her. She looked at the house, the land, then at Caleb. This man, a stranger just hours ago, had changed her whole day with a single sentence. "I'll take her home." It wasn't a dramatic moment for him, but for her, it felt like something that might change the path of her life. Caleb walked ahead a few steps, then paused to make sure she was following. She did. For the first time in a very long time, Mara walked toward something instead of away from something, and with each step, she felt hope growing a little stronger. When Mara stepped into Caleb's house for the first time, she felt a strange mix of fear and comfort. The house wasn't fancy. It had wooden floors, a small living room, and a kitchen with old cabinets that showed years of use. But everything was clean, warm, and carefully looked after. It felt lived in, not lonely. The air smelled faintly of fresh bread and wood smoke, a scent that wrapped around her like a soft blanket. Caleb placed her small bag near the wall and pointed gently toward a narrow hallway. "Your room is the second door on the right," he said. "It's not much, but it's warm and quiet." Mara followed his directions. When she pushed the door open, she found a simple room, a bed with a soft quilt, a small window overlooking the fields, and a wooden dresser with a few empty drawers waiting for her things. There was nothing fancy about it, yet it felt more welcoming than any place she had stayed in a long time. She touched the quilt with her fingertips. Someone had stitched it with care, tiny squares of different colors sewn together. She wondered if Caleb had made it, or if it belonged to someone from his past. She didn't ask. She didn't want to step into pieces of his life too quickly. "Take your time settling in," Caleb said from the doorway. His voice was calm, steady, never pushing. "Thank you," she whispered, still unsure how to accept such quiet kindness. He gave a small nod. "I'll be outside if you need anything." When he left, the room felt both silent and safe. Mara sat on the bed and let out a long breath she didn't realize she had been holding. For the first time in months, she wasn't in a rush. She didn't have to look over her shoulder. She didn't have to worry if she could sleep without being disturbed. The house felt like a place where nothing bad could reach her. She didn't cry, though the feeling touched her throat. Instead, she lay down just for a moment, planning to rest her eyes. But exhaustion pulled her in, and she fell asleep fully dressed, sinking into the soft quilt as if it had been waiting for her. When she woke up, the room was dim. She had slept through the afternoon into the early evening. She sat up slowly, unsure if she should go outside or stay in her room. She didn't want to intrude. She also didn't want to seem ungrateful. She finally gathered courage and walked to the kitchen. She found Caleb heating dinner on the stove, simple food, nothing fancy. When he saw her standing there, he didn't act surprised or annoyed. "You slept well," he said gently. "That's good. You needed it." Mara lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to sleep for so long." "It's all right," Caleb replied. "Rest is part of healing." That word healing felt strange to her. She hadn't thought of herself as someone who could heal. She only thought of herself as someone trying to survive. But Caleb said it in such a calm, matter-of-fact way that it made her wonder if healing was possible after all. They ate dinner quietly, which Mara appreciated. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, the kind of silence where two people could simply exist without pressure. Afterward, she offered to wash the dishes. "You don't have to," Caleb said. "I want to," she replied softly. He let her. She stood at the sink, hands in warm water, watching the last light of the day fade through the window. It felt grounding to do something simple, something normal. Later that evening, Caleb showed her around the property. They stepped out into the cool air, and Mara felt the night breeze brush across her face. The sky was wide and filled with stars, more than she had seen in years. "This is the barn," Caleb said as they reached a large wooden structure. Inside, several horses rested quietly in their stalls. The smell of hay and warm animals filled the air, gentle and earthy. One horse lifted its head as they entered. A tall, chestnut mare with kind eyes. Caleb walked up to her and ran a hand along her neck. "This is Willow," he said. "She's gentle." Mara stepped closer, unsure if she should touch the horse. Willow lowered her head slightly, as if inviting her. Mara slowly reached out and placed her hand on the mare's soft coat. The horse's warmth spread through her fingertips, steadying her heartbeat. "She likes you," Caleb said. Mara smiled, a small, real smile she hadn't felt in a long time. They walked through the barn, Caleb explaining small things about feeding and caring for the animals. He didn't hurry. He didn't expect her to remember everything at once. He simply wanted her to feel comfortable. Mara listened closely, grateful for every moment of calm learning. Over the next few days, a new routine slowly grew between them. Each morning, Caleb was already awake by sunrise. Mara would hear him moving in the kitchen, preparing coffee, feeding the horses, beginning his chores. She often woke up early too, wanting to help. She didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want him to think she was only there to rest. But Caleb never rushed her. If she joined him, he welcomed the help. If she needed more sleep, he simply left her be. On her second morning, she walked into the barn after him. He glanced over his shoulder and gave a small nod of approval. Not surprise. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, nervous but trying. He handed her a bucket. "You can help me feed them today." She tried. She dropped some feed at first. She spilled water. She mixed up the order of tasks. But Caleb never raised his voice. He patiently showed her each step again. When she apologized too many times, he shook his head gently. "You're learning. That's all that matters." His patience settled her more than she admitted. She wasn't used to people giving her time. She wasn't used to mistakes being accepted as part of growth. As the days passed, Mara found herself growing stronger, not just physically, but inside too. She started to smile a little more. She started to feel a small spark of confidence when she completed a task correctly. She began to enjoy the quiet mornings, the smell of hay, and the peaceful rhythm of ranch life. One afternoon, they repaired an old fence together. The sun was warm on their backs, and the fields stretched endlessly around them. Mara held posts steady, while Caleb hammered them into place. He worked with steady hands, quiet focus, and a calm presence that made her feel safe. At one point, she paused and looked around. "It's so quiet out here," she said softly. Caleb wiped his hands on a cloth. "Quiet is good. Gives your mind space to breathe." Mara nodded. "I think I needed that." Caleb looked at her, not judging, not questioning, just understanding. "Most people do," he said simply. Their days blended into a gentle routine. Mara helped with simple chores, feeding the animals, watering the garden, sweeping the porch. Caleb did the heavier work, always telling her she didn't need to push herself too hard. She appreciated that, but she also wanted to prove she could be useful. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Mara stood by the fence looking at the horses. Caleb approached quietly, stopping beside her. "You're doing well," he said. She looked at him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "Really. You're learning fast. And the animals trust you." Mara felt warmth rise inside her chest. Praise wasn't something she heard often. It felt strange, but good. "I'm trying," she said. "I know," Caleb replied, "and that's enough." Slowly, Mara began to open up more, not with big stories, but with small conversations. She told him she liked the color of the fields at sunrise. She told him she used to enjoy gardening. She told him she felt peaceful here, even when she was tired. Caleb never pushed for more. He never asked about her past unless she chose to share. He treated her like someone rebuilding, not someone broken. One night, after a long day of work, she sat on the porch with him. The sky was dark, stars bright above them. She held a warm cup of tea in her hands. "This place, it feels safe," she said quietly. Caleb looked ahead at the fields. "It is safe," he said. "And you're welcome here." Mara's throat tightened with emotion. She had never expected to feel safe again. Yet here she was, sitting on a quiet porch, listening to crickets, feeling a warmth she thought she had lost forever. The ranch had become more than a place to stay. It was becoming a place where she could breathe again, where she could learn who she was without fear. And Caleb, quiet, patient, steady Caleb, was becoming someone she trusted more each day. Not because he tried to rescue her, not because he asked anything from her, but because he gave her something she didn't know she needed. A new beginning. Weeks passed on the ranch, and each day added a new layer to Mara's life. Slowly, gently, quietly. She didn't become a different person overnight. She didn't suddenly forget the difficulties she had lived through. But the ranch gave her something she had not felt in a very long time. Space to grow. Every morning, she woke up to the soft sound of horses moving in the pasture. The sunlight slipped through her window in long, warm lines. She would step outside and breathe in the fresh air, which smelled of grass, wood, and the faint sweetness of the nearby wildflowers. One morning, she walked to the barn earlier than usual. Caleb was already there, as always, brushing Willow's coat. He glanced over his shoulder and gave her a small smile, not surprised to see her awake so soon. "You're up early today," he said. "I couldn't sleep," Mara replied softly. The morning looked too peaceful. "I didn't want to miss it." Caleb nodded. "It's a good time of day, quiet and honest." Mara liked the way he described things, simple words, but deep meaning behind them. He wasn't a man who talked a lot, but when he spoke, his words stayed with her. She took a brush and helped him with the horses. They worked side by side without rushing. It had become a comfortable rhythm, her learning, him guiding, both of them finding something steady in the routine. Later that afternoon, Caleb suggested fixing the old chicken coop. "It's been leaning for too long," he said. "We should straighten it before the next storm." Mara didn't know much about carpentry, but she followed him willingly. He explained each tool, each small task, always patient. Sometimes she made mistakes, but Caleb never grew frustrated. He would simply show her again, slowly, until she understood. She realized something important during those quiet moments. He wasn't just giving her a place to stay. He was teaching her how to rebuild her own confidence. And she was learning. One afternoon, while repairing a loose wooden board, Mara accidentally hit her finger with the hammer. The pain made her flinch, and she dropped the tool. Caleb immediately paused and looked over. "You all right?" She took a breath and nodded, embarrassed. "I'm fine. Just clumsy." Caleb shook his head gently. "Everyone hits their finger once in a while. Even I do." He lifted his hand and showed an old, tiny scar near his thumb. "See? You're part of the club now." His gentle humor surprised her, and she let out a small laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was sincere. Caleb smiled a little too, just enough to show he was glad to hear her laugh. Moments like this slowly filled her days, small learning moments, small joys. They felt simple on the surface, but meant more to her than she could explain. One evening, about a month after she arrived, the sky changed suddenly. Dark clouds rolled in quickly, and wind rushed across the fields. Caleb looked outside and knew a storm was coming. "We should bring the horses inside," he said. Mara nodded and followed him toward the pasture. The wind grew louder, and the first drops of rain touched her cheeks. They gathered the horses calmly, guiding them to the barn. Mara held Willow's rope, talking softly to keep the mare calm. Caleb watched her with quiet approval. "You're doing good," he said. She smiled, breathless but proud. The storm hit heavier just as they shut the barn doors. Rain poured down, and thunder rolled across the sky. The horses shifted nervously in their stalls, but Mara stayed close to them, whispering gentle words. Caleb secured the doors, making sure everything was safe. When they finally stepped inside the house, both of them were soaked from the rain. Mara's hair clung to her face, and Caleb's shirt was dripping water onto the wooden floor. He handed her a soft towel. "Here," he said. "Thank you," she replied, wrapping it around her shoulders. Caleb made warm tea for both of them, and they sat at the small wooden table, listening to the storm outside. Thunder echoed through the sky. But inside the house, the air felt warm and safe. Mara watched raindrops slide down the window. "Storms used to scare me," she said quietly. "Do they still scare you?" Caleb asked. She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Not here." Caleb didn't answer, but she saw something in his expression soften, a small sign that her words meant something to him. After the storm passed, the sky turned calm again, washed clean. The world outside sparkled with leftover raindrops. The air felt fresh, as if the storm had taken something heavy away. Days continued in this gentle rhythm. Then one morning, something happened that surprised Mara. Caleb stepped onto the porch, holding a small package. "This came for you," he said. Mara froze. She hadn't given anyone the ranch address. Her hands shook slightly as she took the package. It wasn't large, just a small box wrapped neatly. Her name was written in simple handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter from a woman she had known long before her troubles began, a friend she had lost contact with when life had become too difficult. The letter was full of kind words, telling Mara she had been worried, that she hoped Mara was safe, and that she believed she would find a good place someday. Mara held the letter close, feeling something shift inside her. It was as if the world outside the ranch had found her again, but gently this time, not to pull her back into pain, but to remind her she wasn't as alone as she once believed. Caleb watched her quietly. "Good news?" he asked. Mara nodded. "Yes. Better than I expected." "I'm glad," he said simply. She folded the letter and looked at him. "Caleb, I want to thank you. For everything." "You don't have to," he replied. "You've done your share of work here, and you're welcome as long as you need." His words were steady, honest. But Mara felt something deeper behind them, not obligation, not pity, but genuine care. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me time to heal. That means more than you know." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. His expression was quiet, thoughtful, filled with something warm and steady. "You did the hard part," he said finally. "You chose to start again." They stood on the porch, the breeze brushing past them, sunlight warming the land in soft gold. It didn't feel like a dramatic ending. It felt like a beginning, quiet and honest, just like Caleb had said. Over the next few weeks, Mara grew even more comfortable. She learned to cook simple meals with the vegetables from Caleb's garden. She grew close to the horses, especially Willow. She found strength in tasks that once felt impossible. And she laughed more small laughs at first, then real ones that reached her eyes. Caleb noticed these changes, though he never said them aloud. But sometimes, when Mara turned away, a soft smile would appear on his face. One evening, they sat together on the porch again, watching the sky change colors. The clouds glowed pink and orange as the sun dipped toward the hills. "It's beautiful," Mara said. "It is," Caleb agreed. She looked at him, her voice soft but steady. "I'm glad you were there that day." At the hall, Caleb turned his head slightly. "And I'm glad you didn't walk away." They didn't need more words than that. Some stories aren't about dramatic endings or sudden changes. Some stories are about two people finding peace in a place where life moves slow, where trust grows quietly, where healing happens gently one day at a time. Mara had once walked into a small town feeling hopeless, unsure if anyone would want to help her. She had stood on a stage feeling invisible. But then one calm voice had risen from the back of the room. "I'll take her home." That simple sentence didn't just give her a roof over her head, it gave her a second chance. And on the ranch, with the open sky, the quiet mornings, the patient horses, and Caleb's steady presence, Mara finally found what she had been searching for all along. Not perfection, not a rescue, but a place where her heart could rest, a place to rebuild, a place to belong.